So that's one of those preemptively to say, how are you doing? And that day you were
It
doing.
was a rough day.
You were doing well.
I've learned to go with the flow and accept a lot more. But I was, I had to be willing when he asked me, how are you doing? Had to be willing to say, well, I'm actually doing okay today. And it takes this level of trust of the back and forth. The more your spouse asks you and cares, the more you're willing to speak up. The more you're willing to speak up, the more they're willing. So it takes this learning how to do this journey together and trust one another.
Well, we're excited today. We have Kristen Faith Evans and Todd Evans with us this morning. They've written the book, How to Build a Thriving Marriage as You Care for Children with Disabilities. Welcome to the program.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Thank you. We're delighted to be here.
Yeah, thanks for joining the show. And I told you before we came on, and for those that listening don't know, I'll just state it again. My wife, Becky, and I have a daughter diagnosed with multiple disabilities. She's got cerebral palsy. She's got a visual impairment. She's diagnosed as profoundly deaf. She has a cochlear implant, so she can hear. She's in a wheelchair. And but it's interesting, as we went through this book, we all realized, and Sally, you were the first one that said it, this book is a book about marriage, regardless of what's going on. It'll help anybody. So we're thrilled to talk to you about this. And I think this, again, will help anybody, regardless of what situation you're in. So, well, for those that aren't familiar with your story, talk about your family and where this comes from.
Sure. Well, Kristen and I, we've been married 21 years now.
22.
22, apparently.
We're off to a great start. I love it.
Yeah.
And we've got a wonderful family that we've kind of just bonded together and learned through so many experiences in our life. It started with Kristen and I meeting in college, and we wanted to go into full-time ministry together and just saw ourselves doing that. Went to grad school at Wheaton College for our master's degrees to kind of focus on spiritual formation and leadership. We're excited about our life and where it was leading us, and worked full-time in ministry for about 10 years. And then things changed.
In my second pregnancy, we learned very early on our daughter has a severe chromosomal deletion. Our daughter, Bethany Grace, she has Crete-Shaw syndrome, so she's missing a portion of genes on her 5th chromosome. She is our miracle. She was not supposed to survive, and she is now 14. Just the joy of the room just lights up when she walks in. She does still face a lot of challenges medically and developmentally, very medically fragile, has a feeding tube, different lung issues. She's intellectually disabled. She's probably on the level of a 2-year-old. She can say some 2-word phrases, understands a lot more than she can say, hearing and vision impaired. We could go on, but our life is very interesting.
So kind of that started a new piece of our journey for us and kind of led us down some very dark paths, as I'm sure we'll talk about. But through it all, we saw God's hand and guidance in it, and we were able to kind of come through it after a lot of working together, a lot of struggles, a lot of just mistakes with each other and in life, and kind of learned from them. And so that's really what brought us to writing this book, is that we looked at it and said, marriage is hard. And we kind of compared it to going camping, that you'd go out, you'd camp, and you have to know a certain set of skills to go camping. But when you're trying to make it in a marriage, raising a child with disabilities, it's more like survival, like wilderness camping. And the same skill sets you learn in regular camping apply, but they will not get you through the tough environment that you face out there. So we decided, we're going to write a survival guide for parents, because we barely survived, and we want to get it out there, a handbook that you can kind of flip through and look at and see what are some skills. So like you said, yes, it's great for married couples in general, but we really try to hone in on some specific things that we found made the biggest difference in helping us to make it and then thrive as a couple together.
Well,
Yeah, well, I don't think, and Kank, you can respond to this, but having a child with disabilities is never on any parent's mind until it happens, right?
Yeah.
We can prepare for a lot of things, but this, no. So, yeah.
Yeah,
That's
and if this book
really-
can help parents with children that have disabilities, I think it could help anybody. So it's
Yes.
not easy, that's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I love you talk about the wilderness journey, and I had to laugh as you listed the first thing that we have to do is unpack our backpacks. And I am a notorious overpacker. So
She is. When we
I
go
need
on
to
a
pay
trip,
attention to this.
she's like bringing a trunk almost. There's massive suitcase full of things.
So take us into that world of needing to unpack and repack.
Yeah, well, we really we led groups, church groups, youth groups, and retreat ministry type stuff, taking people on backpacking trips in the wilderness. It was really firsthand experience, and like we say in the book, it was literally when they showed up. Most people come with all kinds of stuff. Like sounds like you have a trunk, Sally, of things in it.
Guilty.
And we would have to tell them to dump everything out of their pack and kind of reimagine for the journey ahead what was most critical, what was most important to take forward. And they usually would end up taking out 20, 30% of their pack, and then we'd help them to get new things back into that pack. And so we said, that's really a good metaphor for our marriages. What is the things that we try to carry with us that are challenging to really making the marriage work, and how do we get rid of those and then pack in some new things and new skill sets, so to speak, that we can take along with us.
Yeah, so when you have a child with disabilities, it kind of rocks your world. And if you try to continue on pre-diagnosis as you were and trying to do it all, even with all the new, we called them, at first we called them rocks, and then we changed it to literal items. If you try to carry all that weight, pack it all in, you just can't do it. And you're going to be so worn out and so burdened.
So, yeah, one of the biggest ones that was probably one of the toughest for us was our careers and our future. We had all these dreams about what we were going to do together, how we were going to change the church and challenge people. And it got to be, if we hold on to this, it's never going to happen the way we see it's going to happen with that. We have to give that up, dump it out of our pack, and kind of relook at our lives and say, okay, now we're caregivers. What does that mean for our life? And so we had to reevaluate and kind of look at that together. So that's a giant, item that people try to carry around, I think, a lot of times that we had to get rid of.
Yeah, you have to restructure, reorganize.
Yeah, a lot of people may not realize this, but depending on the severity of the disability of your child, like my wife can't hold a job. She would be constantly called in for pick your daughter up. We need to take her to the hospital, or you need, whatever is going on, and she'd probably be fired in a month. So
Right.
You're right. It's like the plan you had for yourself, well, I guess it's going to change.
Yeah.
Yep, Kristen had to quit work completely and stay home for the caregiving.
Well, the appointments, the ambulances, the
Yep.
yeah.
And we actually ended up both completely changing careers and having to relook at that and say, what does this mean for our life? We cannot continue on this. And we had to kind of reimagine and rethink and really spend almost 2 years in prayer about what direction God might lead us for where to go next, and kind of seeking out that different part of our life, and said, we don't know anymore. We dumped it out, gave it away, and said, fill it back up with what you have, God.
Wow.
In chapter 1, you write that, as you were just discussing, there is greater strain on the marriage of caregivers. And you had a sentence in there that said, we operated as separate individuals, just trying to get everything done while caring for both of our children's extensive needs. So is there a story maybe you could share about navigating this, but also, the positive, if there is one, that the strain can often present opportunities for deeper intimacy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd say the best way to describe it is we delegated which was necessary. I did all the appointments, the medical, the therapies, the ambulance rides, and coordinating nursing.
And I took care of all the financial pieces, trying to work, trying to pay the bills, and those kind of things, making sure we could make it as a family together. And it was very isolated avenues we went down for that. She had her areas and things to do, and I had mine, and we really didn't cross paths much with those separation of duties, so to speak, and didn't share much in them, and just we didn't really care about the other person so much, because it was, I got to take care of my stuff to make sure our family survives. And if I don't take care of my stuff, then we're all going to fall apart. And I think we each felt that way, and didn't even ask oftentimes how the other was doing, how we could help, and how we could do some of this more together.
We were trying to carry our individual packs loaded down, not helping one another, not asking, hey, how are you doing?
Yeah. By the way. Yeah.
And so the second part, the opportunity for deeper intimacy, it is tough. Several years, Bethany Grace was probably 3, we realized we're either going to have to be in this together, or we're not going to make it together.
Yeah, didn't your marriage almost end?
It was not a marriage anymore.
Wow.
It was it was, we couldn't stand to be in the same room together.
Wow.
Yeah. It was dark in every single
Just
way.
taking care of the kids, and do what we had to, and kind of a good friendly relationship. Just, well, maybe not. But we could live in the same house, take care of dinners together, things like that. But beyond that, yeah, there wasn't much with that. Yeah, so you're very right.
Yep.
I love how we're working it out right now.
A little bit of a therapy session.
Exactly.
Right.
Awesome.
Even though we wrote a book, we don't have it all.
It's a journey.
It's a journey.
It is a journey. One of the things that you talk about is there's some grief. And for those that don't know, you are grieving what you thought you were going to have. Not that you don't love your child, you do. But, our daughter doesn't play with dolls, can't hold a doll, the typical things that you might think that you would do with a daughter, it's just not the same. And so how did you guys move on past that?
Well, that was actually a big part of what almost destroyed our marriage, and then what brought us back together. We didn't deal with it together. We thought, okay, we found out when I was pregnant, this devastated, severe diagnosis. We grieved together, and we thought we had grieved. What we didn't know at the time was that parents who had children with disabilities experience a different kind of grief, a unique kind of grief called chronic sorrow. And that can be re-triggered at any time. When I would be out at doctor's appointments and see a healthy baby, it was re-triggered. And I was constantly in that all day long, watching Bethany Grace suffer, watching, other kids her age. And that began to drive a big wedge between us, because Todd thought, we grieved, why can't you move on? And so I'm like, what's wrong with me? I can't move on, I'm still grieving. And it was at the point we decided we were going to be in this together, knowing what for better, for worse means, that Todd began to understand what I was going through. And it's been a journey over the past decade of learning to support one another. Like, I had a hard day, it was 6th grade orientation, and seeing the other kids who have friends and, are going to the dance together. And so it can either, you asked earlier about, it's an opportunity for deeper intimacy. If couples can learn to really connect and grieve together and support one another in that grief, we've discovered a deeper intimacy that I don't think we could have found any other way.
I mean, just sometimes it's a simple thing, in a better place now, as like you mentioned, seeing women who are pregnant. I didn't understand that for the longest time, but then once you finally opened up and shared some of that grief with me, it was I wouldn't suggest movies that 3 Men and a Baby or something like that.
A healthy pregnancy.
Yeah, or a healthy pregnancy thing, or if we saw someone, I'd put my arm around her and try to just let her know I'm there beside you. Didn't have to say anything, things like that. So we found ways to connect more through that in the everyday things of life.
It's interesting. It's a grief. You're right. It's what is it? Chronic? What do you call it?
Chronic sorrow.
Chronic sorrow. Especially and you're going to probably be in the same situation, I would assume, that you'll never be an empty nester.
Right.
So.
Yep, that's on our mind.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm the other night I'm in my daughter's bedroom, getting her in bed. My wife she takes the morning routine, and I take the evening routine. Mm-hmm. And every once in a while, my back is hurting me because I've got bad back issues because I wasn't carrying her properly. Because you have to pick her up from the floor, put her in a wheelchair, and back and forth and all this. And I just got sad. I'm like, this is still happening. It hasn't gone away. I'm still dealing with it. And we all are. And it comes to you in waves, I think.
Yes,
absolutely.
And you don't expect it. And next thing you know, I'm standing here in tears, sad over the stuff that my daughter won't ever experience, or that maybe I won't ever experience, and yet I'm still here. Dealing with everything. So I can totally relate to that. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. You talk about very openly, I really appreciate the importance of apologizing to each other and forgiving each other. Can you touch on that? Tell us the story about that.
Yeah, couples who are under, like we were, the pressure cooker, the intense amount of stress. If you don't have strong coping skills, some people tend to deal with that stress in unhealthy ways. And if you don't cope together, it can really damage the marriage.
I'd say I still apologize for how I acted, 12 years ago, that I still feel sorrow and how I did not listen to Kristen's feelings and understand that she needed my support and things like that. So at the time, the start of that was just saying, coming to the end of my road and saying, I don't know how we're going to get through this. I don't know what's going to happen, but I love you and I want to support you. I'm sorry I haven't been what you needed, but I want to be that going forward. And I don't know how to be that. You're going to have to teach me some and work on it together and have grace with me. So it was, just that time period where we kind of realized that, kind of started, we were out on the lake one night and got away, luckily, from a caregiver from our church that was willing to come over and give us a couple hours away, and just looked across the water. Didn't even look at Kristen, I don't think, that night. It was because we weren't really looking at each other, and just told her that and said, I want to make this work. I'm sorry for what's going on. And so that kind of started a long, many-year process of coming back together, because I know I did not listen to her. For instance, she would say, I'm hurting, I need to go to counseling, I need help with this, I can't keep doing this, and I'd say, suck it up, you can do this.
We don't have the money.
We don't have the money.
How are you going to get out of the house?
We don't have the time. She has appointments today. You can't do that. And in retrospect, I realized how crushing that was for her spirit. And so at that time, I started learning how to do that, apologizing, as you say, for that. And there's still times where I'd realize, and just say, I'm so sorry for how rough I was back then. I'm thankful that you stayed with me and worked with me on this.
You're both very honest about, you were right at the cliff, ready to go over, as far metaphorically speaking, of your marriage. So it's really encouraging to hear the power of an apology, the power of forgiving and coming back together again. I was so moved by that. Reading, I was just like, oh, their marriage is going to end. There's no way they can come back from this. And yet look at you now. So that's what's so encouraging to me, to see you two sitting there together. And it leads to my next question is, I especially appreciated that you remind us to laugh together. At first I'm like, well, of course. And then I was like, when was the last time my husband and I laughed together? And so tell us a story so that we can picture what it means that you were able to use laughter to save the day, if you will.
Todd's the one who's better at this. And I just want to say first, it can seem irreverent almost and wrong when your child is suffering, when you're about to lose your house and, everything is just a dark pit. It can seem, one, impossible, but two, are we laughing at the expense of our child, at the expense of how awful things are? But laughter is such a key coping skill. There's so many times we're like, well, that didn't go like we had planned. But the main story that we look back on that we share in the book is there's those times that really difficult, painful situations can drive a wedge and make you argue and just blame one another. And then there's those times if you just pull together and just have to laugh, it can draw you closer. And we can just say that this was several years ago, but we came in, Bethany Grace takes a nap every day still. And it was an afternoon, and this was before we knew to sew industrial strength Velcro on her pajamas. We went in, and a smell just knocked us over.
Yeah, opened the door and just wafting out. Just this unbelievable, you're like, what am I walking into? And as you can begin to imagine, as you're a parent, I'm sure. We go in and of course she's not potty trained, still working on that to this day, but just not only was it not potty trained, but apparently she got bored during her nap that day and had woken up and had literally painted. For description, we have a medical crib that she has
plastic
there.
Covers all around.
Yeah, plastic covers and cloth loops and everything, and so if you, basically a giant canvas, if you want to think of it that way, from her perspective apparently, and just everywhere, not just on the plastic, all over the cloth pieces, all over the bed, all over her face, and
her hair.
And of course the first thing you think is, who's gonna clean this up? and then you look at each other and say, it's us. Yeah. Oh no. Yeah. So you could do paper, rock, scissors and say, all right, who's going to win this one? Which of course leads to both of us losing. So we took the approach, like you're saying, of it's so over the top. I think the only way to deal with this is just to laugh. So we looked at each other and we just started making up jokes.
Or you cry.
Yeah, you can cry.
It's either laugh or cry or both.
I think you're both doing it all at the same time with the poopy Picasso there.
Yes, exactly. You've got the spirit there. We would say, well, look at this beautiful masterpiece, this artwork that she's created for us. And we take bets on, all right, how many boxes of wipes is this going to take? Clorox wipes is this going to take to clean up?
Do you want to do hazmat or sanitizing? And it's like, we wanted to melt to the floor and just, because it's emotionally painful. And you're going to spend the next hour and a half doing this. We just wanted to melt to the floor. And, we could have said, it's your fault. You didn't put the leotard. Back then we did leotards. You didn't put the leotard on it. We could have blamed each other. We could have been better. But that day we chose to
laugh about it.
And
help
pull
each other
together as a team.
And help each other to see it in that context. And it became just a joyful experience, as best as it can be in the situation, obviously, to do that together. And it's one of those moments you just think back on, and we made it. We got through that, and we can get through a lot.
And it's a shared misery, shared memory.
Yep.
You use this really relatable story of hiking and blisters to just kind of illustrate why communication needs are heightened for disability parents. Real quick, can you share that?
Well, sure.
It was so great.
Backpacking trips, we'd always have people that did not know how to care, wear the right shoes or right socks or things like that, even though we told them what to do.
Take care of your feet.
Yeah, take care of your feet. That's critical. And so, like you're saying, red spots can come up. And so if you do regular checks, look for red spots, things like that while you're hiking, you can prevent a festering blister from happening that's going to ruin the rest of your trip. And so there's a lot of preventative things that you can stop things before they get to that critical stage where it can be literally painful to potentially life or death, if you're in certain situations like
an
that.
Infection and I think it goes both ways. In our illustration, you have to be willing to speak up, which I did about my mental health. Now, there's positive examples, and then there's this one that was life-threatening. We'll just say that. I spoke up and said, you know what, I'm really struggling. I'm still reliving the pregnancy and Beth, watching her code. I need to go to counseling. So I'm speaking up. I've got this festering wound that is really painful. And Todd was like, oh, your foot's fine. Just keep hiking. Why you just deal with the pain, it was almost. And so I was willing to speak up. But then later on, we've learned you have to check in. You have to check in with your partner. You have to say, how are you doing? How are you holding up carrying your pack? How are your feet doing? So you get that invitation of, you check in, they care, that, they're going to check in. You have that time, which is really important every day, actually, emotionally. And then, gradually you feel safer to speak up and say, you know what, I'm not doing well.
Yeah, so it's a both and. You got to speak up for yourself, but you also ask the questions that do that. Just this last week, we were at the Sparkle pageant for our daughter Beth, and it's a special needs pageant they do here in town that's really special and neat to see the
it's
kids.
Supposed to be fun
and everything, but of course we struggled and wasn't the greatest experience. So preventatively,
struggled.
Yeah, at the end of it, I kind of just like same kind of thing. Put my arm around Kristen and just said, "Hey, how you doing?" Because that's one of those moments that's you've got these dreams of your daughter being in a beautiful dress up there, even in the disabilities, and her able to shine in a place that's meant for her. And to see it where she's not willing to come out on stage,
she's
where
crying and terrified
so that's one of those preemptively to say, how are you doing? And that day you were doing.
It was a rough day.
You were doing well.
I've learned to go with the flow and accept a lot more. Mm-hmm. But I was, I had to be willing when he asked me, how are you doing? Had to be willing to say, well, I'm actually doing okay today. And it takes this level of trust of the back and forth. The more your spouse asks you and cares, the more you're willing to speak up. The more you're willing to speak up, the more they're willing. So it takes this learning how to do this journey together and trust one another.
You also talk about the two specific conversational needs that disability parents have. Can you just touch on that?
There's a lot of logistics, a lot of intense conversations we have to have. I want to say everyone with children, they have to have conversations, but these conversations can be intense. And you have, in order to get to those more intimate conversations, you have to become more effective at getting through the who's taking who to therapy today, what kind of doctor's appointments does she have, is the nurse going to come, getting through those more effectively, which we suggest keeping a digital calendar just so you don't have those conversations in the morning. Then you've also got the very intense conversations about, I feel like something's wrong, I think we need to get an assessment, and then you've got just those conversations can just monopolize anytime you have to talk, which is not a whole lot of time when you have a child with disabilities. So we talk about those two additional conversations, working together to become more effective at those so you can make time for the more intimate conversations.
We normally start them, with a phrase sometimes to help kind of direct the conversation of, what does today look like for you? Or where do you need my help today? What's going on today? all those are leader sentences for that logistical conversation that we have to make sure we're targeting in on the right things, and looking to focus on those, to make sure the things that have to happen. But then, like you said, there's the other side of type of conversation too. That's your standard, just how are you doing? How was your day? Those kind of conversations where we try to have that more intimate, that we really try to separate them, because it's so easy to get the logistics conversation into the intimate conversation, and you can't get intimate when it's all logistics. And
stress and the stress.
True.
So we try to really separate those and allow those to happen in different compartments and even different times of day, for us to help separate them better.
You guys talk about moving into full-time caregiving and the living loss that's involved there. Describe what that means to people and how you've dealt with it.
Just take a deep breath. That's a coping skill. There's a bonus one for you. But there is a living loss. I mean, we already mentioned our careers, that we just felt like that was a loss that we had to give up. There's the loss of normality as a family. Just driving by the soccer fields, you see them, you see families out there, and you just look at it and say, don't have that. That's sad,
If you're doing well and actually validating your emotions.
Or even, last week, I just broke down crying just thinking about, remembering how many great family reunions we had in my family, and doing a graveyard cleaning, and everybody comes out. And it's a fun time with all the relatives, and we're probably not going to have, our future generations. Beth isn't going to have children, and we're not going to have that. And it just overwhelmed me, and brought me to tears, because of that loss of things that aren't there. So that's, there's things like that all the time that just overwhelm and come up out of the blue, it seems like sometimes. So that's definitely a living loss that we have to work with. And it probably took me 12 hours to even tell Kristen what was going on last week, and tried not to cry out loud. And even though we've built all this, it was still just one, I just couldn't talk about it, but two, it just feels almost embarrassing sometimes of selfishness that you might have of what you wanted and don't have anymore. And so there's both sides of that loss and embarrassment, both,
or guilt.
And guilt. Yeah.
You talk about that living loss and how important it is to stop and rest. How do you guys get rest? I mean, we should all rest in our marriages.
There's different types of rest. We did not rest together for years, and that was a big problem. We've learned that we need to rest individually and together, which can feel impossible for a lot of special needs parents. The thought of being able to get out of the house together just feels impossible, especially if you have a medically fragile child. And so we just decided we don't know how we're going to do it, but we have to find a way. We have to find a way. And so thankfully we have a support system, and rest may look like we get away for 3 or 4 days. It may look like we go away for one night 5 miles away.
Or even when we first were in this, and before we built more of these systems in place, it was all we could do to get away for an hour.
Yeah.
And so finding a way to do that, and do that. So finding that way to get away, to rest, so to speak, together your souls. It can look like asking a family member to say, hey, it's nap time right now for our child. They nap at 3 o'clock. Can you come over and listen to the monitor so we can go sit on the back porch and just look at the squirrels, and maybe talk.
That's the humor.
and that is rest. And so you feel guilty asking your friend to do that or your family members to do that, but you have to speak up and do that.
You have to ask for help.
Yeah, so that's one way. We built in more ways as we went along of finding ways, using respite programs with the state, using local church programs that offered some respite time, so we could get out for 2 or 3 hours, and go have coffee together. Those are some great dates. Just getting away for that hour and a half to go for coffee, and doing that. But then we also have an individual need as well, and we found ways to give that as a gift to each other. We have short ones, like I'll come home and Kristen will say, "Hey, you look like you've had a rough day. Go for a run." And for me, that's an energizing, kind of recalibrating thing in my life. It is an activity, but it is a restful activity for me. And
Mentally.
And she said it nice, not go for a run.
Yes, exactly.
Go on, get out of here.
Sometimes I say, you're grumpy. Not usually, but.
Yeah, the hangry sometimes as well. But so that's one way on a little scale that we do it for each other. But then on larger scales, we've said, hey, I'm going to take care of the kids this weekend. You get away and do something. That was some of the genesis of even her getting to write in the first place, was saying, hey, before we even had the idea for a book, just get away, collect your thoughts, do some writing. I know you like writing. So we rented a little condo in the woods for her to go away to for the weekend. And I said, you go, I got the kids this weekend, and you take that. And she's done similar things for me too. But it's that combination of individual little pieces of rest and togetherness as well. And
it has to be outside the house, especially for women. You have to get out of the stress.
Good point.
Tell us about how backpacking led you to understand there's different approaches to something as fun.
Well, yeah, we did when we first started backpacking together. We had very different mindsets of how we would backpack.
Philosophy,
so to speak. So for me, my favorite part of backpacking is by far the nighttime. Is you get to your campsite, you unpack, you go and you collect the wood, you break the wood, you make the fires, you have fun making the dinner, you go rest your feet in the creek if you have one.
Sounds exhausting.
And that's what's so fun. So for me, getting there to that destination is the critical piece and what is most important. So it's hike all day long. Yeah, you see something, take a 5-minute break, maybe. If you need a drink of water, take a quick one, but we got to keep moving. We got to get to the campsite. That's where it's fun. And so that was my mentality, and I tended to run up hills just to get up them faster, just because I wanted to get to the campsite. Was so excited for that. But Kristen, I had to keep prodding and poking her and say, "Come on, what are you doing? You're a slowpoke."
I have asthma too.
Asthma doesn't matter. That's why you have an inhaler.
Why are you running up the hills?
So
we're making him sound bad, but he really is an amazing guy.
But I really was like that in the past, too.
That's funny.
But then, so what was your philosophy on camping?
I like to take breaks so that I'm not exhausted. I'm so exhausted when you get to the campsite the first couple of times we went. I couldn't enjoy it. My feet hurt. I had trouble breathing. Or there might have been a waterfall along the way. I love waterfalls that I wanted to hike down to see. Maybe sit there and have a relaxing lunch and swim in the waterfall. Or there was a gorgeous patch of flowers I wanted to stop. And he's like, come on. And I'm like, but I just want to sit here and take a break. And so I was exhausted. He was energized. I hated hiking by that point with him, which I used to love it. And I was like, this is just not working.
That's funny.
Wow.
I love it.
So we had to work on that, obviously,
Yep.
and we've compromised and found ways of doing that in the backpacking field. But yeah, just the same as we do in our marriage now. We have different approaches, and
we had to communicate. I had to say, I hate this.
Yeah,
I think
around the bush.
I think there's some threats there of I am never going out with you again on this trip if you treat me this way again or something like that.
That's
She wasn't
hilarious.
that mean, but. But yeah.
Just as we begin to wrap this up, I have to ask that there are people listening like me and who don't have any children with disabilities. How can we help provide support for parents like you and like the Cankle Fritzes?
The main thing is don't be afraid of saying the wrong thing or making them feel bad. Offer to help and say, I genuinely want to help you? Is there a very specific way I can help you? Can I bring dinner, sit with your child so the two of you can eat on the porch? And they may or may not be comfortable with what you're offering, but offer a very specific way. And the biggest thing that can help a married couple is for them getting some time alone together.
And that can often come in many ways of helping them to find more time in their day to take care of those little tasks. Like you said, specifically say, hey, can I hire someone to mow your grass for you this week?
Wow.
That's an hour that you just gave to our lives that we may be able to invest in one another, or bring a dinner over, or come over and offer to clean. We're not going to ask you to do that. We're embarrassed of our situation.
And we may say no the first 3 times.
Yeah.
Yes.
But keep trying. So specific things is what other couples can do to help, and say, can I do this for you? Can I do that for you? Or what can I do to help? And once you do it enough, they'll know you're serious and mean it, and they might be willing to open up and tell you what they really need. So that's one. And the second one is related to our book. And then part of what we're doing with it is we really want people to just offer to give that to other couples. Get it, read it yourself. You'll find some nuggets in there that'll help your own marriage. But as a couple, we don't have time to go to the bookstore and find a book. We don't have time to seek out help.
Or the money to buy it. Or
we're surviving. But if you gave us a book like that, we're going to take a look at it. So we encourage you to, whether it's our book or whether it's other resources or things, find some things to give them to help them in their situation.
How to build a thriving marriage as you care for children with disabilities. Before we let you go, there's something that you guys do at the end of every chapter, which is very unique. Describe that.
we believe in being very practical. We don't want to just share a story and then leave it for the couple to figure out how to apply it. So we have very practical exercises. They can pick one to start applying
we tell
today.
Them, we tell them to only pick one.
Actually,
because your life is overwhelming.
It is overwhelming.
We want you to pick one thing from this chapter to work on. There may have been 10 things in the chapter, but pick one and practice it this week. And we give you some things to do. Some I won't call them assignments because it sounds like homework, but there's things that practically you can do. We try to give you suggestions of things to practice that are going to improve that area and that aspect and skill in your marriage and in your life.
That's good. I like that. Well, thank you so much for your time, and it's good to get to know you guys better. I felt like as we're having this interview, I'm like, yes, that's true. All those things are accurate, what you said. Absolutely, 100%, as a dad of a daughter diagnosed with multiple disabilities. Thank you so much, Kristen and Todd. Appreciate your time.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. Again, the book is How to Build a Thriving Marriage as You Care for Children with Disabilities. Kristen Faith Evans and Todd Evans. Thank you very much. And if people want to know more about you, how can they do that?
Yeah, so our site and ministry is disabilityparenting.com. We have lots of free resources. We just believe in equipping special needs parents to thrive. And you can learn more about the book there. Contact us. We're also on Instagram at Disability Parenting.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.